Welcome to the Lead Change podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Mary Mulcahey. I'm an orthopedic sports medicine surgeon with a huge interest in contributing to the growth and development of other leaders. On this podcast, we will share stories from many leaders in all medical specialties to understand the skills necessary to be an effective leader. We'll celebrate their success and hear about strategies to overcome hurdles. We will also highlight some of the unique challenges faced by women in medicine who are interested in pursuing leadership positions and the importance of mentorship, sponsorship, and allyship in achieving and being successful in those roles. Let's work together, build on shared experiences, learn from those before us, and use these lessons to propel us forward in our career. Let's lead change. Welcome everyone to the Lead Change podcast. I am so excited to welcome Maddie Davis Tully to the podcast. Maddie is a certified leadership coach and a former Division I national championship coach and athlete. She works with high-achieving leaders, especially former athletes who are taking on bigger roles and more responsibility and want to feel as confident, capable, and in control now as they did in competition. She has spent 2 decades in high-performance environments, first as a national champion rower at Princeton, then as a coach at Stanford, Ohio State, Boston University, and the U.S. Under-23 national team, and now coaching ambitious corporate leaders who are looking for more. Maddie and I first met at the Inspire Women Orthopedic Summit in October in Philadelphia, where she gave a fantastic talk entitled Focused Excellence, Don't Do It All, Do What Matters. We have continued to interact regularly, largely through social media. I enjoy seeing all of the content that she posts. I really find the messages to be engaging and inspiring, and I'm sure you will as well. I can't wait for Maddie to share her insight and expertise with all of us. So Maddie, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
Mary, what an intro. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm really excited to continue our conversations and be a part of this.
Awesome. Well, let's dive in. So before we actually focus on some of your leadership roles, I wanted to start by asking you how you decided the topic of your talk at the Inspire meeting in October and what you really hoped that people would take away from that.
Yeah, I did some research leading up to speaking at that conference. I do not have a background in orthopedics, and so I wanted to make sure that what I was bringing to the group was going to be really relevant. And so I was able to speak to the conference organizers ahead of time, especially Dr. Danielle Ponzio, who's actually a college teammate of mine. We rode together.
That's awesome.
So so those sport connections run deep. And so I was able to speak with her quite in depth about, what life as an orthopedic surgeon, what the concerns are of the people that were in the conference, and really understanding what those challenges are and recognizing that they're not unique necessarily to this population, but they certainly are heightened. And that idea of really protecting your energy is something that I am really passionate about, especially as I've learned more about it throughout my career and in working with the clients that I do work with, who are all, high achieving people who have very high expectations for themselves, their careers, their lives, and that energy management piece becomes such a critical part of it. And I think often we talk a lot about time management, which is important, but it's often easy to look over the energy management piece of it, which is finite. And so really thinking about what are you doing in your day-to-day life that is draining energy, what's giving you energy, what are you avoiding, what can you be doing more of, and recognizing some of the energy drains are unavoidable. You gotta do the paperwork, you gotta do the admin, you gotta do some of it, but how can you structure that so that you're doing it as effectively as possible and then protecting the energy for the big things that matter, whether it's the big things at work, but also the big things out of it too, so that you're not just coming home, drained at the end of the day without energy for yourself, your family, and your pursuits outside of that.
Yeah, I think that is such an important point, really critical to make that distinction like you did between energy management and time management. Those things are completely different. And I love that you emphasize that in your talk and to a room of, orthopedic surgeons or aspiring orthopedic surgeons. But it is so important because they are different. And you described it perfectly. But it is really critical that we understand where's our energy going, what is depleting it, as you said, what gives us energy, what brings us energy, what inspires and motivates and empowers us. And although it may take time, but it rejuvenates us. Like this podcast rejuvenates me, inspires me, and gives me energy, right? So that is a great example. But I think it was a perfect topic for that group. And so it was awesome that you shared that message with us. And I think everybody took a lot away from that. So I just wanted to do a side note and really mention that Dr. Danielle Ponzio and Dr. Megan Bishop, who coordinate the Inspire Women in Orthopedic Summit, are absolutely phenomenal. They have done an incredible job coordinating that meeting, which has now been going on a few years. And so for anyone out there who has not had that experience or doesn't know about the meeting, I would very much encourage you to check that out. There's really a tremendous amount of helpful information that is shared there. Great speakers, great networking, and that has typically been in October. So definitely keep your eye out for the opportunity and for the information about registering. So now we're going to switch gears a little bit. And Maddie, we are going to talk for sure about what you're doing now in terms of your career. But before we do that, I would really appreciate it if you could share with everyone a little bit about how you got involved with rowing and your experience specifically as a rower at Princeton.
Yeah, so I started rowing in high school. I grew up outside of Philadelphia, so for anybody who's from the area or has been there, you've probably seen Boathouse Row, like right along Kelly Drive as you're driving into the city and the art museum. So it's a big part of the identity of that town. And I started rowing in high school after, frankly, failing at every other sport I had tried. And I got really, really into rowing. It's just not a unique story for rowers. And I took to it like pretty much right away and really enjoyed it. And wanted to start taking it more seriously from pretty early on. I really do, without going on too big of a tangent, I do really appreciate that rowing is a sport that you really can't start doing much before high school. And so it gives you some time to do a lot of other things, to do a lot of other sports, and be at a point where you're like, I actually do want to get more into this, and you can kind of make that decision as a high schooler. So I continued to train all throughout and compete all throughout high school, and then continued on at Princeton University, where I competed in the lightweight women's rowing team there. And I absolutely loved my time there. I loved my education, the classes. I majored in classics, so I really enjoyed being able to dive deep into ancient Greece and Rome, and to continue rowing there at a really high level, at an incredible boathouse. The lake's right on campus. Like, it is every rower's dream, I think, to have that kind of experience. I had incredible teammates, and it really was, I mean, it was hard. It was really challenging to have all of that on top of, your education and everything else that was going on. But I always found that having practice and having that time out of my schedule, I think coming back to like what's time management and what's energy management, I mean, it drained me for sure physically, but having rowing made me a better student. It made me a better leader. It allowed me to do so much other stuff. And I would think about like, what are my classmates doing at this time? I mean, some of them were studying their butts off for sure, but a lot of them were like taking naps and playing video games too, So yeah. I found that having that time really helped me structure the rest of my day and my time at school too.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear about kind of how that came to be, and that you made several great points, but one, like, that you really can't get involved in rowing until like high school or whatnot. So it's not like you're starting at the age of 4 or 5 or 6 as you do with some sports, and where some athletes can even get burned out by the time they're in high school. So you're really just starting to get that experience in high school, and so you've had the opportunity to like learn and grow and experience some other sports as well up to that point. And the other part is, so I ran track in college, like high school, all the way up through my 4 years of college too. And so I totally understand what you're getting at there. I joke and say, I have no idea what any other Dartmouth students did between the hours of 3 p.m. and 6 p.m. I don't know, because I was at the track all the time. And on the weekends I was at meets. But I agree, it was a hugely valuable experience. Just, I had very similar connections with my teammates, and I loved every minute of it. It's a huge part of my life, part of my identity. And I think many athletes feel that way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it gave me an immediate family and home base at a place that, when you show up as a freshman anywhere, it's scary. And, I didn't know a lot of people. It's very intimidating. And then you come in and you sort of automatically have this group, this family that just like pulls you right in. And I think that was really helpful to just kind of getting my feet under me pretty quickly.
Yeah, you straight away have those connections, which is so awesome. So you started to go into this, but I'd love for you to expand. What were some of the most valuable lessons that you learned rowing at the collegiate level?
Yeah. Oh, man. Patience, I think, was a big one. It's like running. Rowing is a sport that's it's a lot of repetition. It is certainly, there is a skill to it for sure, but it's not the way there is in ball sports. You're pretty much just going, and improvement comes, but it is incremental. And so really developing the patience to appreciate that. And I think in conjunction with patience, it was the ability to appreciate the process and celebrate the wins along the way. Rowing, you train so much, so long. Typical training session is an hour and a half, 2 hours, if more, for a race that's going to take like 6.5 minutes. That you're going to get to do, a couple of times in the spring. Realistically, the spring season's the big season. You race, 5 times during the regular season, and then you get a championship race or 2. So it's a lot of work for a little bit of payoff. And so, you learn to really find the wins along the way, because if you just wait for the spring, you'd never make it. And then that discipline, the discipline, not only with rowing, but then to be able to structure all of my time around that, and having to be really strict with myself and saying, you do have to go back to the library after practice. Yeah, you are going to have to get that project done on Saturday, because, you're going to go race, or get it done on Friday because, you're going to race on Saturday. Really having to structure things and be disciplined about it so that you get to do the things that you want to do. Ultimately, it's that idea that discipline is freedom. Like, I always thought, if I could do the work now, then I'll have the freedom to sleep and rest and go to practice early. I think it taught a lot of that. And then also just how to be a good teammate. I think my team in high school was really small. And I was on different teams. I was in my high school team and then club teams in the summer. And I did a lot of rowing in singles and doubles and in small boats. And in college, it was a larger team. We were rowing in bigger boats, in 8s and 4s. And it really pushed me to be a better teammate and to think more about what everybody was doing and how to help everybody be better, not just myself. And I think that was a skill. Honestly, I could have learned more in college, but I did learn it a lot, particularly as I advanced in my time there and took on more of a leadership role on the team, informally and then formally as a captain. That really pushed me to think beyond just myself and think about what was for the betterment of the whole team.
Yeah, such great points. And I definitely want to expand on a couple of those. I think absolutely critical, something you emphasized, is celebrating the small wins, right? That is really important, not just as an athlete, but in life, like every day, right? If you're only thinking about the final destination, the final goal, the final whatever it is, then you're missing out on so many opportunities to realize the progress that you've made and to just really celebrate and appreciate like how far you've come. So I think that is really important, and I hope everyone takes that away. It's critical that we think about that, and not just be thinking long term, because sometimes if you're only thinking long term, it's hard to stay motivated to stay disciplined, which is another point that you brought up. It's hard to keep that going. Motivation is what will get you started, but discipline, as you really appropriately brought up and emphasized, is what keeps you going through the hard times. Getting up early for rowing, right? That is, you're up early every day, but getting up, being able to do that, then completing the projects, discipline is really what allows you to be hugely successful as an athlete and then throughout your career. So I think those are 2 points I love that you brought up, and teamwork certainly is essential and central to everything that we do in medicine. That's really critical. As an orthopedic surgeon, we work with teams in the OR, we work with teams in the clinic, and so I think that's a huge thing that athletes bring, right? Is the understanding and having worked with teams in bringing those valuable skills.
Yeah, and I think along with that piece of being on a team is knowing how to play your part. I'm sure that's very important for you in the OR, for everybody there, right? And whatever we're doing, I think athletes tend to be good at knowing you have a role to play, and that you're a role player, right? That's where the phrase comes from. But knowing that you have a role to play and a job to do, and that contributes to the whole, really translates into success, I think, beyond sport, professionally, in a family, in life beyond that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. And then after you graduated from Princeton, you went on to serve as head coach at Stanford, Ohio State, and Boston University, all incredibly high-powered institutions, incredible rowing teams. So congratulations. That is amazing. And so
I was not head coach in all of them.
Okay, all right. Please clarify before I go any further.
It's too much. I was the assistant
Hey,
coach.
just take the credit, Maddie. Just take it.
Someone's going to hear this who knows the truth. I was the assistant coach at Stanford with the Stanford lightweight women. And then I was an assistant coach and the associate head coach at Ohio State. And then I was the head coach and director of women's rowing at BU.
At BU. All right, perfect. So it was kind of as you rose, BU was the last place you coached. Okay. Awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying. But that's the growth, right? That shows growth in the coaching role too, right? And you learn and then up to, a second institution and ultimately head coach at BU. So that is fantastic. But when and how did you really decide that you wanted to become a coach and that you wanted to rise through those ranks and ultimately serve as head coach?
By accident. My senior year of college, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was a classics major, so that didn't really lead to a direct career pathway, we'll say. And so I started to really think about, I took a bunch of informational calls, marketing and advertising and business, looking at sort of the traditional, what I thought the jobs people at Princeton were all going to go get. And none of them were really that interesting to me, honestly. And I started to think about, well, what do I know that I love? And can I try to make a living doing that? And I knew I loved rowing and I knew I loved school. I thought, how can I combine these two things? I started thinking about boarding schools. I sent an email to every boarding school in the country that had a rowing team. And I said, hello, can I come and coach your rowing team and teach history or English? And one school got back to me, which is actually in the town of Princeton, the Hun School, and they needed a rowing coach and they needed a substitute teacher. I worked in the resident life office. I started there and I really did think I was probably going to go into teaching. When I did that, as I was there and I got to coaching more, I realized that the coaching was really speaking to me and to my strengths and my interests better than I think the teaching would have. To be fair, I was substitute teaching here and there, so that's just a tough gig. But what I was really surprised by, and I think didn't necessarily expect, was how much love I had for all of the athletes on the team pretty immediately, and how seriously I took the responsibility of being their coach. I knew this at the time. It becomes crazier every year removed I am from that. I was 23 years old and the head coach of the team. That was nuts. And yet I took it really seriously, and I knew that I was responsible for these kids, not just, helping them lower their 2K score or win on the lake that weekend, but I saw really quickly the impact that I could have on the way they thought of themselves and conceived of what they were capable of doing. And there were a couple specific instances where I saw that right away and realized oh, this is this is it. Like I can really impact people's lives like this and get to do a sport that I love. I realized that was where my heart was. And then I pretty quickly had the opportunity to go to Stanford. So I was only at Hun for 1 year before I was able to go out to Stanford and be the assistant coach there and get into college. And then, yeah, just kind of keep on moving through.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear that it just that sort of happened. But then what you took away and what you appreciated and understood very quickly, like in serving in that role and the impact that you could have on those students. And
yeah, I thought I was just going to win races. Like I just wanted to win some
yeah, I just want to win. Exactly. You're like, I know how to win. I come
career.
from a championship team. I know how to do this.
Well, I ended my career with a loss, and I think I was like trying to revenge the loss, you know? And I was like, I'll get a couple of wins and I'll like go get a real job. And then 15 years later, I still going.
Right. It's incredible. So, what were some of the leadership lessons that you learned throughout those coaching roles?
Oh my gosh. I mean, more than I can list, but you know, I'll try to think of some of the most important ones. The biggest one I think I learned as a coach, and I use as a coach and use pretty much every day as now a performance leadership coach, is seek to understand before being understood. And as a sports coach, that often the first reaction to come into a situation is to tell the athlete what's going to happen, particularly when something has gone wrong, right? I cannot believe you were late to practice again. Why are you not getting better? Why are you not following team rules? You know, whatever it is, it's to make them understand. And I've learned that through other coaches, which is where most of your training comes from as a sports coach, and the importance as just a human, as a leader, to come into a conversation understanding that you don't know what's going on. You don't know what's going on with the other person. You may have an idea, you may be right, you may have been coaching this athlete for 4 years and you know exactly what's going on, you think, but it's always, always, always the best move to come in and seek to understand first. Ask them what's going on, ask them what they think is happening, ask them before you come in and drop the hammer. Sometimes you do still have to drop the hammer, but it's always better to know what you're dropping the hammer onto than not. And that was a tricky one to learn because I feared that it would soften my message or my leadership too much. And especially as a young female leader, I really wanted to be seen as a tough leader. And I didn't want to do things that would, appear to undermine that. But over time, through tough lessons, learned that, real leadership is understanding and empathy and showing care for the people that you're leading and being tough when the time comes, right? You have to do that, but you don't have to be tough all the time. And that was another big lesson I learned, particularly becoming a head coach, was I came in too strong. Looking back at it now, I was hired to be the head coach there at 29. And I felt young and I wanted to be seen. I felt young, but I felt ready. And I wanted to, be in charge. And I wasn't myself. I didn't laugh and joke around with them the way that I do with everybody else in my life. I didn't want them to see all of me. I wanted them to see me as the tough leader. And it wasn't working well for a while. And eventually I realized that's not going to work. That's not the kind of leader I want to be. It's not the kind of leader I would want to be led by. And I had some athletes on the team. They were great kids and they were tough kids and they were giving me that feedback too. And credit to them because that's not easy to say. And I realized this is also what they need too. And finding that adaptability as a leader is really key. And I had athletes on the team who were able to be there and see the growth and the transition from myself and I think from our coaching staff, and to be able to recognize that and appreciate that in us was so huge for me in my leadership skills, but I hope also modeled a good example of leadership and growth and adaptability in leadership as well.
Yeah, I think, the first point that you really made about seeking to understand like where they're coming from, like that's so important. I think we a lot of times we assume we know what's going on, or you're just going to jump straight to like what the issue is, but it's such a critical point that you made, is really trying to understand what the background is, because there's often something else going on, right? These are, high level athletes, they're committed to the sport. Like you would think, okay, maybe there's something else that's making it so they're not getting to practice on time. Like maybe it's something in their family or with school or whatnot. So that is really, really valuable. And then also, not that this specific word was used, but as you were talking about, being tough and maybe not always showing every aspect of your true personality, but speaking to the importance of authenticity too, and like not being afraid to be who you really are. And that's what the athletes wanted. So I think that's such a great point and a lesson to take away of how critical it is for anyone serving in leadership roles to just be who you are, but also understand, you have to take into account the context too, right? Whether it's coaching, or we're in the OR, or we're in the clinic, or you're presenting at a meeting, like you do have to take into account the context, but still being who you are and who you want to be in that setting, right? And that's absolutely such a great point that you made.
Yeah, right. There's going to be some things I'm not going to talk to the 19-year-olds about.
Right.
There's going to be some things you're not going to tell your patients about, right? And yet, being yourself is a leadership strength. And it's a way also, I think both of those things, seeking to understand and being transparently and authentically yourself, an extra benefit of that is it's a great way to build trust and buy-in from the people that you're leading, because they see that their input is valued, that what they say matters, and that the leader wants to hear it. And they can see that if the leader can be herself, quirks and all, then they can be themselves too, and that they don't have to be perfect, because the leader doesn't have to be perfect. And it builds a level of trust and buy-in amongst the whole group.
Yeah, that's so important. I mean, to get, everyone is then even more motivated to move towards that collective goal. Everybody trusts each other, respects each other, and like wants to work hard together.
And it's more fun.
Yeah, exactly. And it's more fun. And that's really what it comes down to. You just want to be having fun too. Yeah. So you have served in numerous other leadership roles throughout your career, including as president of the Collegiate Rowing Coaches Association, which is so cool. And I definitely want to hear a bit about this. But what were some of the initiatives actually that you were able to help implement by serving in that role?
Yeah, so that was a fascinating experience. I took over as president of the CRCA. So this is the organization for all coaches of women's rowing at the collegiate varsity level. So D1, D2, D3. So we had hundreds of members across the country. And I became the president of that organization the summer before COVID. And so COVID, up until that point, the CRCA played a really important role for coaches, but it was pretty confined. We hosted a conference, we did a salary survey, we had a couple of meetings a year to kind of try to get ahead on NCAA rules, compliance, and things like that. It was pretty straightforward. And then COVID happened, and I think this comes to the question of like, what were some of the initiatives that we did? I found myself in charge of a group of people who were accustomed to doing a whole ton of work all the time with nothing to do. Our teams were gone. And also at a time where we needed more organization and proactive leadership and collective movement than ever before, because we were coming back to campus. We all had different rules. We were all trying to practice under those rules. We could collaborate and share ideas in a way that would be really, really impactful for the experience of our rowers and of our coaches if we did it well. And so the good thing was, we found ourselves with a board that was really, really motivated, and we got a lot done during that time. So we started getting ongoing coaching education throughout the year. Like everybody else, we learned about Zoom. And so we were like, we're going to have Zoom all the time. But we learned a lot. And so not only did we have great education, but we had more opportunities to connect across the country. So coaches were meeting other coaches who they would have never come across. A D1 coach in New England is talking to a D3 coach from, Texas, and now who never would have come across each other in regatta settings. And so there were some really incredible things that happened that way. And then at the same time, some rowing programs were starting to get cut as well as we were coming out of COVID. And so that really pushed us to start to think about how can we advocate proactively for our sport. And that has only become more important with the professionalization of college athletics and NIL and all of this. We could do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, that's another episode.
Olympic sports are in a tenuous situation. And so we were, right at the beginning of that and realized like we have to get together because programs are getting cut. And actually the team I coached at Stanford, the lightweight women's team, was cut and then reinstated during that time period, along with a couple of other teams there. And so we started working to build tools to help coaches proactively advocate for their teams. And so really trying to think about how can we move the profession and the sport forward using our own internal resources.
Yeah, that is great. I mean, the pandemic obviously was a difficult time for everyone in the whole world and facing different challenges. And I think, a few points you brought up, like for people who are used to being busy and doing a lot of things, I think it was like, you're like, whoa, all of a sudden, like literally like the world was stopped and nothing was happening. So, but there was a silver lining, right? So then you guys used that energy, you used that time to do so many amazing things for your organization, for the sport, and many of those things have continued and moved forward. So it's fantastic, making the most, bringing good things out of a difficult situation. So tremendous. I love that.
Yeah, and I want to also be mindful of the audience of this podcast because like woe was us to find ourselves with too much time on our hands during a global pandemic. Like we were fine and we made the best of it, but we were not in the position that most physicians were in during that time.
But even still, I mean, and focusing as a sports medicine surgeon and part of a sports medicine team, like there was a lot going on with regards to like how to take care of the athletes, right? How to keep them healthy, how to allow, how to reinstitute sports safely. So I think a lot of people listening this is going to resonate with them. So I appreciate that and being mindful of the group and certainly those on the front line. Like I have no idea what that was like and I have huge amounts of respect. But yeah, we all faced different challenges to different extents. And it's just like, we're all just happy that we are 5 years we're past that, obviously still seeing some implications and the world was changed really forever. But before we dive into some of the other roles, Maddie, and focusing on some other leadership stuff, can you tell us a little bit about what it is that truly drives you? What is your why? What's your purpose? And what really motivates you in everything that you do?
Yeah. It's two things. I like a challenge and I like to be useful. And so those two things come together. You can see why coaching collegiate rowing was a good fit for me. It was always a challenge. We were always very directly challenged, as a team, as a coach. We were constantly put in situations where I had to be better and had to evolve and grow. I don't like to sit still. I don't like to do the same thing too much. I like to be in different situations where I have to grow and adapt. And so I really like being challenged in that way. And then when I left collegiate rowing coaching and went into performance leadership coaching, that remained the same. I like a challenge. When I left rowing, I thought like there were a lot of things I could do. I picked probably one of the hardest ones, which is to go and like have a complete career pivot, start my own company, become an entrepreneur, and go out there and help others, which ties into the second piece, which is I like to be useful. I like to help others be their best. And tying back to, we were talking all the way back to coaching in high school, I think I quickly realized and appreciated the impact I could have and that I could be of use to those athletes on their journey, that I could be somebody along their path who believed in them, who gave them skills, who helped them become a version of themselves, and then like let them go and continue to develop. And so that usefulness is important, something that's really important to me, and that I get to continue now as a coach, where my goal is to be of use to the people that I coach. They come to me at a point in their career and their lives where they need something. They're facing a challenge. They've been promoted. They're leading a team for the first time, or they're leading a team that's getting trickier. They're having to think bigger picture and more strategically within their company or their career. They've started a family. They're training for a marathon. They're doing things that now they need some help to figure out how to do that at the next level. And then I get to come in and be useful for that. And this, just like my athletes, I get to help them see what they're capable of, build the skills to do that, experiment, figure it out, and then go out in the world and do that. And those two things I find are always really at the core of the things that I do that excite me and inspire me and make me want to keep working harder.
Yeah. So that is so great. And I can see that even, these past several months that we've been interacting and your presentation at the meeting and just learning about all the things that you've been involved in and your coaching. And so I think I would agree completely, right? That it truly embodies like all that you do. And I think it's so critical to understand what it is that motivates us. And maybe some people listening may not understand or may not know exactly what it is. What is their why? What's their purpose? But the more you think about it, like what excites you, that's exactly what you were saying, Maddie. What excites you? What drives you? What really is like you are so passionate about doing, right? That's the why. That is the underlying thing that drives all that you do. And so critical and helps you make decisions and choices as you move through your career.
Right. Understanding your why, your values, being able to look back across your life and the things that you have really loved to do, that you want to come back to time and again, that really give you energy, that motivate you to keep going, and being able to take stock of those and see what they have in common and what it is about them that is the best part to you is, I think, an exercise I do with a lot of my clients, but is an exercise that's useful for all of us to do, just to really dig into like, well, what about that is so important to me and so it energizing and inspiring for me.
I think sometimes we're, in medicine and life and all these different careers and professions, we're running around like crazy people and don't often take the time to like reflect and really try to think like, what is it? What have been the things that are most sort of motivating to me? So I think really that's a great point that you made. And I love too, you just made the natural transition into your coaching business. And I'm grateful for that. That is my next question up. But so Maddie, you founded MDT Leadership. So you've touched a little bit on this, but explain to everyone listening, what is MDT Leadership and what are the ways that people can really benefit the most from working with you and your team?
Yeah, so what I do is I'm a high performance leadership coach. I do speaking and I do workshops and I do a lot of one-on-one work as well. That's the main focus of my business, where I work with typically mid-level professionals, mid-career. A lot of them have athletic backgrounds, and they are typically coming to me because they're getting promoted, they're taking on more responsibilities, they're looking to take on more responsibilities and take the next step in their career, but they recognize that what they've done up until this point isn't enough anymore to get them to where they want to go. So whether that's their leadership abilities, their confidence, their mindset, their strength and their certainty of themselves, right? They recognize that they're going to need some help to get to where they want to go. And that's where I come in, is to help them to be able to pull out of the weeds and to be able to think about the big picture at work, at home, in their lives. What do they want to get out of this whole life? People tend to come to me at a stage where they're just starting to think about like, oh, I've got like a whole life ahead of me. And I want to make sure that I can do work that I love sustainably, that I can be there for my family, that I can be there for myself. And because I tend to work with high achieving people with high aspirations, athletes who are coming from a background with very high discipline and work ethic, I see a lot of similar challenges where strengths are becoming over-indexed into becoming weaknesses, where having those high standards for yourself then becomes, an inability to let some things go, and being able to prioritize your work and recognize that this is something we talked about at the conference, not everything can be an A+ job. Not everything needs to be an A+ job. Some things just need to be done. That work ethic, the discipline that's required to get to that stage in your career can then also be a detriment when you then need to work with a team of people who operate very differently and maybe operate differently than you. And you need to lead, not only work with them, but to lead them as well. Something I see a lot when people come to me is something we've talked about that we see in the medical field and you see in pretty much every profession is you get started and you find success in your career because you've done one thing. You have been a surgeon. Some of the people I work with, they're an executive recruiter. They're an executive assistant. You do that really well, then you get promoted. And now you're in charge of executive recruiting. You're in charge of the team of executive assistants. You're in charge of a whole bunch of surgeons and a whole department, right? And now the skills that got you there are totally different than the ones that you need to be successful at this one. And they're skills that probably nobody has taught you up until this point. And that's where it'd be great if that was a part of being promoted and getting those jobs, but it's not. And then that's where I come in and can help people fill in those gaps and become just as confident at the next stage and at leading as they were at doing the job that they had before.
Yeah, I think you really emphasize the value of having an executive coach, a leadership coach, and someone who you can just have a discussion with and who hears what you're saying and can help you process it, and understanding that, yes, the things that have helped you be successful up to that point may not be able to help carry you through that transition. So it made me think of a book. I haven't read it yet, but I want to read it, right? So is What Got You Here Won't Get You There, right? And that's by Marshall Goldsmith. And it's on the list of like the many leadership books I want to read. But just your point is really critical, that and that you as a coach and your team can really emphasize that to the people you're working with to help them understand. They may say like, why am I not able to make this transition? Why am I not able to feel successful in this new role when I've been able to be very successful up to this point? And so just as you're saying, it's like, well, you might need a new skill set or a new way to look at things, and not everything has to be A+. Like, I love that, and I have to try to remember that myself. And I mean, even in orthopedics, we do say, what the enemy of good is better, right? So it's like when you're trying, like making small adjustments, taking a lot of time, like extending a case in the operating room for a lot of time for a teeny tiny improvement. Like, of course, always our goal is to take exceptional care of patients, and we would never compromise that. But if spending an extra hour to adjust a screw by a millimeter, is that going to change the outcome? It's not going to. And it's just like you said, A+, A-, like the outcome is still going to be excellent.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And what I think my role is I work with people who are going to figure this stuff out on their own. They're going to get promoted, and they're eventually going to figure out how to lead, because I work with super smart, capable people. But my role is to help them do that faster and with a little less pain along the way, less trial and error. My role is to help you get to be that great leader faster than you would be able to do it on your own, and with less discomfort and pain and collateral damage.
Like less people. I love that. No, I mean, I've worked with a coach for 8 years. She's amazing. And I tell everybody about the value of executive and leadership coaching. And so I love that you're doing that. And I know that you help a ton of people like you said, kind of navigate these processes, and you have so much experience and can help them exactly like see these things and navigate it easier and kind of reach that goal sooner. Yeah. I'd love to ask this question too, because I'm always curious. What would you define, Maddie, as your superpower? Okay, and by that I mean, what's one of your biggest strengths, really, that helps set you apart from other people and has really contributed to your success?
That's a good one. I think I can see patterns really well in myself, and I think most importantly in the people that I'm helping, whether it was athletes or now the coaching clients that I work with. What I'm good at is being able to pull back a little bit and to look at the big picture and see the patterns that are both working well and not, and try and make some tweaks. I always thought when I was coaching rowing, my job was not to like come in and chop down the forest, but to just trim bonsai tree. And to be able to do that, you have to be able to see the whole thing, see the patterns, know where to make the trims, and keep going. And that's something that I do well with my clients. I do well as a coach. And I think I also see comes up a lot in how I live my life is I'm able to recognize like these are the things that are happening time and again for me, and what's working and what's not, for better or worse. I think being able to see that has been really valuable for me, throughout my career and life.
Yeah, that's an incredibly valuable skill, and almost like you have a vision, but you see it ahead of time. I love the analogy of the bonsai tree because I was always so impressed with how they look. But I've never seen it from start to finish. But it's amazing to be able for you to like have in your mind you have this starting product or this thing you're starting with, and what do you want it to be ultimately, or how can you help get to that sort of final goal? So really fantastic analogy. So the name of this podcast is Lead Change. So Maddie, what does lead change mean to you?
Well, so I was thinking about this because my first thought is in rowing and in racing. When I first heard about the name of your podcast back at the at Inspire, was the lead when there's a lead change in a race, and that what the image that I saw immediately when I heard of it was like, oh yeah, this is like we are taking the lead now. The lead is changing. We weren't in the lead and now we are. and that's, for all of us, the number one rule for racing, we always said in coaching rowing, was when you have the momentum, keep the momentum. And that comes with a lead change. When there's a lead change and you've got the momentum, you got to keep it going. But you have it, right? It's much easier to keep it going than to get it in the first place. And so first thing I think of when I hear lead change is that lead change in a race. And then the next piece is then just carrying on that momentum.
That is so fantastic. I love it. And from the mindset and the perspective of an athlete, right? So that is so fantastic, and just shows you like there are different ways to interpret things, but that still is very much in line with what we talk about, what we focus on in this podcast too, is like carrying this momentum forward, like supporting leaders, supporting diversity, supporting growth and empowerment, and inspiring people. So that is so fantastic, Maddie. Thank you for sharing that perspective. And I like to close out with two questions that I ask all of my guests. So first is, have you read any leadership books that you have really enjoyed and that have been particularly impactful for you?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so many. This one, I'm not the biggest Pete Carroll fan, but Pete Carroll's book, Win Forever, is excellent. And he has his flaws, but he has found success at a lot of different places throughout his career. And when he talks about how he went through his process of developing his coaching philosophy, I found it really, really interesting, very honest, I think, but so applicable, obviously to sport coaching, but to everything, is to understand why you do what you do, what the philosophy is behind it, and being able to distill it down. And for him, it's the idea of win forever. And so that his goal there is to win at each thing that he does. And like, yes, that's a football game, but it's also in preparing for the game. It's in every little piece that goes into it. It's winning all of those pieces. And so I like that idea. And then I have some books behind me too that are always good. The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday is not necessarily a leadership book, but a good book for a classics major. And I do think Stoic philosophy is truly timeless. And I leave that book there because I often pick it up, and it's one that you can just flip to any section, and it gives you a good reminder that like you will face challenges, and that you should. If you're doing anything worthwhile, you're going to be challenged and you're going to fail at some things, and that the only real failure is to never challenge yourself enough to
and
face
never
that.
Try, right? And never try.
Pull out the old philosophers.
Yeah.
Exactly. To just play it safe. And so sometimes those old Greek philosophers and Roman philosophers are the best.
Yeah, but bringing in the classics, right? And sorry, I did not mean to speak over you.
Yeah, I think it's always a nice reminder too to have, I like to look at systems and pull back, to realize that everything that we're going through, yes, times are unprecedented. Every time is unprecedented, and that everything has been thought about before, and to be able to think that, okay, thousands of years ago, people were thinking about facing challenges and living a life worth living in a way that is 100% applicable to what we're doing now. Not only is it good advice to read, but I really appreciate the perspective that it helps me maintain, that, whatever is right in front of me today, right now, is very important, and we are part of a much larger history, and that perspective and being able to kind of go with the flow a little bit is very helpful.
Yeah, I agree completely, and it's so great that you brought up the whole idea of stoicism and the book, The Obstacle is the Way. I get a lot of my updates and news from social media, and so I follow the stoicist on Instagram, and I love all the quotes, all the messages. I think that it's so relevant and really sort of resonates with, I think, a lot of people, myself included, and so I appreciate that. And the last question I wanted to ask you is, do you have a particularly favorite quote?
One is, now that we've just talked about the Stoics, I'm pretty sure it's Aristotle, but it might be one of the others. We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is an act, not a habit. And I like to think of excellence as an action that we take, and that we are what we do. And I like to view that as just take the action, take the step, and then that's what you become. You don't have to be the thing first to act that way. You have to do the thing first to be the person that you want to be.
Taking action is essential to everything that we do, certainly to be a good and effective leader, but just to continue to grow, to challenge yourself, right? Never to be afraid to take that next step and to think, oh, I can't be this thing. But you're right. You have to just take the step and you'll become that. You'll be able to do it. You'll achieve this goal. And so I absolutely love that. Action is absolutely the key here. So Maddie, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I have really enjoyed hearing about your experience as a collegiate rower and how that laid the foundation for becoming a head coach at BU and ultimately founding your own leadership coaching business. I know everyone listening will appreciate the incredible insight and valuable lessons that you have shared with all of us. I'm so glad that we met in October at the Inspire meeting, and I really look forward to many more opportunities to work together.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Mary. Thank you for having me here. I've so enjoyed this conversation, and I have really relished the opportunity to just talk leadership for a while. I love it. And I'd just like to tell your audience and anybody listening, if you're interested, one of the things that we talked about in my presentation at Inspire was the focus filter, which is a tool for really trying to put pen to paper and take action, as we just said, in really focusing on where your energy is going, where you should put it, and what you can set aside. And so I've found it to be a really useful filter with a lot of people I've worked with. I shared it with everybody that was at the conference. So if any of your listeners are interested, I'd love to share it with them, so they can find me on my website, mdtlead.com, or you can just shoot me an email directly, madeline@mdtlead.com. And I'd be happy to send that your way, and you can give it a try.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And definitely check out Maddie's feed on social media. There's a lot of great content, very inspirational messages. I love to see the pictures too, and some stuff from rowing. But really, Maddie, thank you again for being here. And I know we'll connect again soon. So good luck with everything. And I look forward to seeing you.
You too. Thanks so much, Mary.
You're welcome.